All right, 7:30. Time to start. We'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. Good to see you back. I think I've met everyone, and this is at least most of your second term or third time here. Of course, it's only been 3 times, right? This is like the third meeting. Anyway, it's good to see everyone here. I'd like to welcome everyone in the live broadcast. Glad you could join us tonight as well. And of course, those listening to or viewing the archives, because after we do this, it'll be archived. So glad to have you too. As usual, we'd like to start with the reading of our 9 principles of belief. The spiritual philosophy of metaphysical humanism is based on 9 metaphysical principles that empower and enhance the human condition. These solid principles are excellent as the foundation of an individual's core values, but sufficiently broad enough to complement most spiritual beliefs. All the Church's articles, classes, courses, and writings have some basis in these principles. So let's read principles. Number 1. As sentient and evolving human beings, we not only believe in practicing and living by the principle do no harm, but also in the principle of do right, thus enhancing the vibrational level of humanity. We believe in the indomitable power of the human spirit to ultimately triumph in the face of any dilemma. The answers we seek already exist within us. We invoke and exert the counselor and guru within. Number 3, we believe that we alone are responsible for and capable of solving human social problems, and believe the roots of those solutions lie in exploring, understanding, and empowering the human condition. Number 4, we embrace the differences that make all human beings unique, recognizing that we all come from star material and are therefore equal, irrespective of heritage, beliefs, gender, or gender preference. One planet, one race, one ancestry, one destiny. This is number 5, rather than a supreme being, we recognize and honor the divine energy that exists in all living things. Number 6, we believe the nature of a human being encompasses both a physical and spiritual aspect, and that human consciousness survives the death of the physical body in a coherent fashion. Thus, death opens a new chapter of life and conducts the individual into a higher state of existence. Number 7, we believe in self-acceptance, self-responsibility, and respect for free will, and that these 3 synergistically create the goal of self-completeness, which is also self-actualization. Number 8, we believe in the value of practical education in metaphysics, metapsychology, and life skills as a means of empowering the human spirit and enhancing the human condition. We maintain an open but grounded mind to potential realities as yet undescribed by science. And number 9, we believe that discovering the true nature of consciousness and human existentialism will ultimately have a positive impact on human evolution and peaceful coexistence. For more information on these 9 principles of belief, you can visit metaphysicalhumanism.org, and there's a further explanation on them if you'd like to read that, mostly for the benefit of our viewing audience. Tonight on the program, if you remember last week, I talked about the Life Leadership Paragon, Part 1. We talked about self-acceptance. We're going to talk about self-responsibility, which is the second part of it tonight. Dr. Vicki Hunter will be joining us from British Columbia, as usual, via Skype. Her topic will be psychic perspective. What is channeling? She's, in fact, we're going to name her segment Psychic Perspective, because most of what she's going to usually talk about has something to do with psychic stuff. So that's a new term. You remember that one, all right? Psychic stuff. Kind of an alliteration, isn't it? Not really, though. The third segment, which is exploring the unknown, we had scheduled for near-death and shared-death experiences. We're going to still talk about that. Unfortunately, Grant Rubendunst, who was going to cover that, had an unexpected issue come up with work and couldn't make it tonight. So I'll be going over that, and we'll open it up to you too, group discussion. Maybe you have some thoughts on near-death experiences, shared-death experiences, and the like. So we'll do that. And then, of course, we'll have some announcements, and we'll finish it up with our Soul Light meditation, guided meditation. So that's the program. Last week we talked about the Life Leadership Paragon. Paragon simply means a model of excellence, and that's what this model is. It's on this poster here. in the middle there. And the life leadership paragon is composed of self-acceptance, self-responsibility, respect for free will, and self-completeness. Or these three, the first three create self-completeness, the ability to stand on your own 2 feet, to not need somebody else to complete you. Now that doesn't mean we don't have healthy interdependent relationships, and it doesn't mean that we don't have interact with people. It doesn't mean we're an island. It just means that we have a healthy self-concept, and we don't need to depend on anything outside of ourselves to get along in life. Self-acceptance, just a quick brief overview, we talked about the need to accept oneself, warts and all. We talked about perfection. Who here is perfect, by the way? Good answer. Yeah. Well, we'll raise our hand too. So, you're perfectly where you are because of the choices and decisions you've made in life. There's nobody better at being you than you are. So you're perfect in the only real sense that makes any sense, and that is you. We're all perfect, just like we are. You don't like something about yourself, fine, change it. But you're still a perfect representation of you and the choices you've made in life. So that was perfection, all part of self-acceptance. We talked about the proper view of mistakes. You make a mistake, welcome to the human race. That's what we do. And we have to have the right attitude. We embrace those. We learn the lesson, we make amends if necessary, and we move forward guilt-free. We don't hold that guilt bag over our shoulders like I talked about. Well, when it comes to the next part of the life leadership paragon, it's self-responsibility. Now, just a FYI, this life leadership paragon, I spent many years developing it, and my purpose with it was to try to come up with a model that I couldn't reduce any further. And so I spent a long time selecting those 3 or 4, if you will. Self-completeness was always the objective, but what supports that? And I wanted as little overlap as possible, so I tried to reduce it down to something simple, because simple is better. We can understand it easier. So self-responsibility is the second one, and it really, this aspect of it really involves 3 universal laws of personal responsibility. And okay, there's the first one. Hey, you're supposed to wait for me to say next slide, please. Just kidding. Thanks, bud. All right, first universal law of personal responsibility. You are wholly and ultimately accountable for your choices and actions, past, present, and future. Now, most of us will probably look at that and say, yeah, duh, right? Say yes. Good answer, huh? Have you ever known somebody who doesn't really appreciate this? And so, like we talked about last week, is there a difference between knowing a lesson and learning a lesson? The answer is yes. When we learn a lesson, we change. So this is a reminder. We are where we are because of the choices we've made, the decisions we've made in our life. This was really brought home to me back in 1999. I was in St. Louis, Missouri. I was at a training. It was a financial training that I was doing for a company that I worked for. And and the room was, well, a little bigger than this one, but we had cubicles. There's a lot of trainees there, and we all had our little temporary cubicle for the week. And it had a hutch on this desk that I had. And so we're making calls. And so I'm on the phone, I'm standing up, and I'm just kind of leaning a little bit on this hutch. And I'm talking to a prospect or client, whoever it was. And I happen to notice there's this little thing stuck on the inside. There's a little mirror. Want to see it? It was nobody. Somebody left it there. I knew it needed a new home, so I took it. This is it. It's got a magnetic back, and it was stuck to the metal side, just like that. And I happened to notice it, and what is that? So after I concluded my call, I grabbed it and I looked at it. And on the face of this were some words that really were profound to me. Next slide. I am looking at the person responsible for my future. It's a little mirror. And I thought, wow, how heavy is that? I mean, we all know that, right? But when you put it in that kind of presentation, it means something. It carries a lot more weight. And I really thought about that. Wow. And so I printed those words out on paper and I stuck them on the mirrors in our house, and our three boys looked at that growing up, and it worked. So there's a tip for you. Hey, parenting tip. It worked. But isn't that amazing? I'm looking at the person responsible for my future. So I got thinking more about that, and I thought, well, if it's true that we are responsible for our future, if we go back in time a year, we could say the same thing, right? I'm looking at the person responsible for my future, so we could equate that with I'm looking at the person responsible for my past. Now, we have to be careful here because we weren't always adults, right? So we're not looking for any guilt. We don't do guilt, right? No guilt. You do something you don't like, you may have some regret, fine, let it drive you to change or whatever. No guilt. But we're looking at the person responsible for our past. And as I said a zillion times, we're here because of the choices we've made and the things that we've been through. Now, if you're like me, you might look back and think, wait a minute, hold the phone here. There was some stuff that I went through that it wasn't my fault. I didn't create it. Like in an alcoholic relationship, I didn't create the alcoholic. It wasn't my fault. And yet, we went through the ringer, went through tough times because of that. So how am I responsible for that? Well, as I thought more about that, it dawned on me, okay, I'm not responsible for everything that happens in life, in the world, but I am responsible for the choices I've made. Whether those choices were made with good intentions or not, it doesn't really matter, does it? I still made the choice. I still made the decision. And this only underscores why it is so important to be in a healthy place ourselves, because like attracts like, doesn't it? It does. That's just a cosmic law. You get what you focus on. That just happens all the time in life. You want something, you think about it, you dream about it, you focus on it, you visualize it, and as sooner or later it's going to happen. I mean, that's just human nature. That's just the way of life. And so it underscores why we have to be in a healthy place, why we have to have a healthy self-concept, because if we have a healthy self-concept, what are we going to attract in terms of relationships? Healthy people. People with healthy self-concepts. Doesn't mean that the unhealthy people won't come along too, but because we're healthy and we have a healthy self-respect, we can say, gee, we're just not meshing. Our energy signatures, our vibes are just not meshing. So we never become friends. We never carry that on because we don't harmonize, healthy and unhealthy. So I'm looking at the person responsible for my future. I'm looking at the person responsible for my past. Looking at the person responsible for where I am today. And that's a powerful thing because we are responsible for that. So that's the first universal law of personal responsibility. You are wholly and ultimately accountable for your choices and actions, past, present, and future. You need to step up to the plate, obviously, and take responsibility for that. Make changes if necessary. The second universal law of personal responsibility is don't expect others to do for you that which you can and should do for yourself. Now let's just let that slowly simmer for a minute. Don't expect other people to do your stuff. Don't expect other people to do things for you that you ought to be doing yourself. That doesn't mean you can't ask for a favor. You need a little helping hand now and then. That's okay. But if we practice expecting other people to do our stuff, that's not healthy. And it's not taking responsibility for our lives. As adults, we need to take care of our stuff. Now this leads into the third universal law of personal responsibility, and this is a big one, heavy one. Never do for others that which they can or could and should do for themselves. Never do for others that which they could and should do for themselves. Now, think about that for a minute, and if you think about it, you'll understand that that is pretty much the definition of codependence. What do codependent people do? They do things for other people that those people could and should do for themselves. Now, let's get codependence down here. Let's understand it properly. Codependent people, very, very strong people. They carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. They're the fix-its, the fixers. They want to fix things. They want to resolve things. And they're strong. There's a danger, though, in it. And I'll just let you know, back in the day, I was the king of codependence. I was really, really good at it. So I'm kind of coming from a previous experience here. I was good at doing things for other people they could and should do for themselves. When we do that, we end up enabling perhaps poor behavior, right? And that, obviously, in addiction or addictive relationships, alcoholic relationships, there's a lot of that codependence going on because they're enabling the addict or the alcoholic to do what they do. We don't want to do that, and here's why. If we do things for other people that they could and should do for themselves, are we not taking responsibility for that person, in essence? We are. Do we have the right to take responsibility for another adult? Now, there's always exceptions to the rule. There's adults who can't take care of themselves, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about children. I'm talking about other adults, spouses, partners, friends, whatever. We can't assume responsibility. Does that mean you can't do a nice for somebody? No, of course not. The kicker here is that we don't want to practice doing things for the people that will enable that other person in an unhealthy pattern. That's it. So that's the third universal law of personal responsibility. And that's the three. That's why if we understand personal responsibility properly, like in those three ways, we have a much healthier self-concept, we have a much healthier outlook on life, and we get along better. We have more success because we know what to take responsibility for. Which leads to the other thing. Whose stuff is it? You ever known somebody who takes responsibility for things that are just not theirs to take responsibility for, and that results in guilt and things like that? We have to be wise in that, use good judgment and good discretion to not take responsibility for something that is not ours. That can happen in cases of molestation and other abuse. Well, it was my fault. Daddy beat me because it was my fault. I didn't do this, I didn't do that. That's absolutely wrong, incorrect, and unhealthy. It's not your fault. You're a child. Children need guidance. They don't need the other stuff. They need guidance and love. So we have to be careful to not take responsibility or ownership for something that is not ours to take ownership for. Make sense? I'll assume that's a resounding yes. Yes. Yes, it makes great sense. Okay, so we've talked about the Life Leadership Paragon, Part 1, self-acceptance, self-responsibility. Next week, we're going to talk about respect for free will. This is another big one, and there's some really, really good life lessons, practical life skills involved in the respect for free will aspect. So we'll talk about the third one next week, and we'll also wrap it up with self-completeness and just put it all together. So that's that. All right, let's continue moving on with the program. Next up is Dr. Vicki Hunter. And for the benefit of our new viewers and attendees, Dr. Vicki Hunter has worked as a clairvoyant for 40 years and is an accomplished spiritual counselor and educator. She is a former TV host and the author of several books and programs, including her flagship work, Principles for Natural Laws and Learning. She serves on the church's board of directors and is also the vice president of operations. Since 2011, she has co-hosted the church's weekly radio program entitled or named Metaphysical Universe, along with myself. That is no longer because we're doing this. Dr. Hunter holds a PhD in Metaphysical Humanistic Science, specializing in spiritual counseling, resides in British Columbia, Canada, and her topic tonight is Psychic Perspective, What is Channeling? Dr. Hunter, let me get the sound turned up here.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. It's warming up here, I'll have you know, but we do have a lot of snow. So it's really nice to see you. Tonight I wanted to tackle the subject of what is channeling. And there seems to be a lot of different ideas about what channeling is. Are we all right? I think not. 1 minute. I think we don't have sound. Do we have sound now? We're good? We're good to go? Right on. You know, this is, it's all new and we're still learning. And no matter what I have learned in all of my years working in the media, that live productions are very risky because we can have lots of technical things. So, but I'm really glad to be here. So if you didn't hear me say that part, I'm going to say that again. I wanted to address tonight what is channeling, because there seems to be a lot of different ideas about what channeling is. And I think we can safely put, for the terms of our common lingo, the difference between channeling versus being a medium. In my view, it's all various forms of channeling, but commonly we know of channeling as trans-channeling. And in my day, way back when I first started studying and getting to know different people and doing a lot of reading, commonly it was Jane Roberts with Seth, and read that way back in the 70s, and I really enjoyed that material, and it was very interesting. Edgar Cayce, of course, was another big name. And since then, there have been lots of new people to come up with channeling and what is that. So when there is another entity, that could be a spirit, could be what they call an ascended soul, or even extraterrestrials for that matter, they would conceivably take over what appears to be taking over someone's body and using it as an instrument to speak through. And I don't necessarily think somebody takes over. I think that we move over so that our bodies could be used. And it seems like there's a trance because you're in a body, you're having shared space. I have done that back in the 70s. I didn't like it very much myself, but I preferred to be what's termed as a medium. And the medium being somebody who can listen and mediate or be a medium instrument between what other information might be coming from another source to be able to give it to whomever's, you know, wanting, like say, if it's in a reading, for instance, it could be somebody's mother's come through or their uncle or a brother or a spirit in some way or other energies. And I do tend to believe that it's all varying degrees of channeling. So we're channeling an energy, channeling another entity, if you will. Some people argue that it's all from the superconsciousness, that there's this universal source. And that's why there's a lot of controversy about trans-channeling or mediumship. A lot of people say that folks are making that stuff up. A lot of people think that they're good actors or they're just good at knowing how to read people or using skills. So, you know, it's all about perspective and beliefs. Now, because I happen to be on this side of the fence, having had some experience in talking to people without bodies my whole life, I think it's perfectly normal and natural myself, but I can say that because I feel really confident to say that I know who I am and I know how my own mind works. And I know when there's a conversation that's not of my own thinking, that's not of my own origin, or using words or terminologies or phrases that aren't familiar to me. Now, again, the flip side is, the controversy would be, well, maybe there's a little bit of multiple personality going on there. So there's this whole other psychological study on it, and it's arguable. Everybody has their perspective, and arguable that we can branch off into the study of psychology and the psychodynamics of what the mind or the brain is. And consciousness, in my view, exists just outside of the brain, but using the brain as an instrument. So we're spirit before we come to this body, and then we, of course, when we're finished with it, and we leave. But the soul just it transforms its energy, and I think that's how I understand entities of any kind are just another form of energy. The contact can come through to anybody, whether that's through your dreams. It can come through in some form of, what we call daydreaming or an altered state. And again, hypnosis is like a state of mind, a state of being. So it can feel like it's a hypnotic state, but it's just an altered state of consciousness. And I think that people do it more than they're aware that they do it. It's, for instance, I've had really brilliant ideas for business, and I think about it, but 6 months later, there it is on the shelf. I'm thinking, okay, did I catch that through the ethers, or did I really think I had a brilliant idea? Well, obviously it was a brilliant idea because somebody else is selling it. So where do these ideas come from? So I think that we're channeling other dimensions or other sources of information all the time. I really enjoy a lot of information that is channeled from other entities. And I admire people who don't mind to have that shared space to move over. Even in mediumship, whether it's going on a psychic investigation and you use somebody who's a medium who can mediate and bring the information, or if it's in a reading, or there's many different ways. And of course, we all have our strengths of how we smell, see, hear. And we talked a bit about that before. So, how we translate that. The caution, I think, is always about what it's coming through, meaning the brain or our own belief systems. So how we translate or think about an entity giving information through a picture, or it's not so much words, but through these other variable senses, and we have to make sense of that. Well, we're going to make sense of that through our own belief systems or our own processing. Now, it was perfectly understandable that if somebody is a very devoted Christian who has one of these psychic experiences or is a medium, they're not likely going to see Buddha, because that's how they translate. Or someone who is of a different religious context or belief system is not going to see something else. It's how we translate the information. So the more we get to know ourselves and the more we recognize that we do have some biases, and I have my own, we have some biases that are also filtering through, we can then evolve to be as objective as possible in what information that we're getting. Because we have to understand who that information has to go to if that's our job at the moment. I'm not so sure trans-channelers necessarily consider, I think that's just, this is an entity, has something to say, and whoever receives it, they write about it, they produce videos or put audios out. That's a little bit different context. I think when mediums work with people on a more intimate basis, whether that's, John Edwards is a perfect example. He's giving information that he's getting and delivering it to somebody in the audience. Again, a lot of people think that there's more to it than just being a medium. And that may or may not be true, but that's not the point. I think what he does do is he demonstrates a measure of hope and a measure of something else that we can aspire to, something else that we want to evolve into, to connect with our soul self, other spirits, other entities, energies, and so on, that we're connecting with these other dimensions. So this, although this moment is the only moment that we have here and now, we're living and fulfilling that moment, we're also aware and conscious that there are other things going on. And that's actually the really extraordinary mystery about being human, and this mystery of the universe that we're all attempting to figure out to some degree. Sometimes I think things are just meant to be left to a mystery. But really, we have to be cautious about how we're listening to the information that we might get, how we're translating it, and even messages that come from other people that we've watched or read about. They also are filtering that information through their own belief systems also. So, you know, we can extract what fits, what feels good, what senses is more correct, or what may apply in that moment. So it's a pretty normal thing in my world or in my reality, and but hopefully just to open our minds to know a little bit more and be grounded in a sensibility too. So I always want to know what is that about? Why is that happening? How did they get that word versus this word, that idea versus another idea? So I hope that helps and gives you something else to think about.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. Guess I didn't mute it.
My pleasure.
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Hunter at all on that? I'm sorry, oh, I turned it off? That ain't true. I turned the mute button on. Wasn't me. Can't prove it. What was I just talking about? Self-responsibility? There we go. Sorry I blinked you out, but it wasn't me. It's demonized. All right. Any questions at all for Dr. Hunter before we move on? All right, Dr. Hunter, thank you very much. Good points, and appreciate you being here tonight as always. All right, so we'll move on then to the next and last segment, kind of the last segment of the program, and that was on near-death experiences and shared death experiences. And I'll open this up to you as well. I have a mic here for the benefit of our broadcast audience, so if you have a question or something, just raise your hand and I'll give you the mic. How many are familiar with near-death experiences? Probably everybody, right? Okay. How many are familiar with shared death experiences? Anybody? You ever heard of that? All right. I'll tell you about both. Near-death experiences, and the term was coined by Dr. Raymond Moody in this book, Life After Life. And this was published in about 1975. If you haven't read it, it's a good read. It's a good book to read. But let me see if I've got my information. I don't have my information. Near-death experiences, as most of us know this, when a person dies clinically dead momentarily, as the case may be, could be from drowning or any other reason, they experience a whole nother reality. They will float in a tunnel of light with a light at the end is very common. Quite often their experiences can be colored by their religious beliefs or their personal beliefs. So as Dr. Hunter said a few minutes ago, if they're Christian, they're probably not going to see Buddha. They're going to probably see Jesus Christ, and vice versa. They can move along to the tunnel. They hear this voice. They feel an incredible, profound sense of well-being and acceptance, love that apparently cannot be described in words. They will move along, usually, and it can vary. They can be walking down a path to somewhere too, but it's a journey of some sort, whether they're moving through a tunnel toward a light or down a path towards something. Quite often they report dead loved ones that are there to talk with them. This voice that they hear, usually this being, this primary being, again, exhibiting deep love, acceptance, unconditional love, as they say, and they don't want to go home. They don't want to come back. It's so incredible, almost, I guess, intoxicating, if you would. So that's That's kind of the thing. And then usually they say, well, you're going to have to come back, or you got to go back. The voice tells them they got to go back. And sometimes they'll come back with a jolt, and they'll be back in their body. Sometimes they're able to see things, and well, they often are able to hear the doctors talking if they're being operated on. There have been cases where they've actually put things high up. Maybe you've heard about that. As a test for this near-death experience thing, they'll put a glove or a sign or something up on a cabinet high where you can't see it. And they've had reports where people they're floating out of their body, and they float and they rise up and they see it and they tell them about it later. In fact, there was a shoe on a roof story I heard or read about that's pretty interesting, and nobody knew it was there. This patient couldn't have known it was there, but after they came back, they knew it. So that's near-death experiences. Basically, the person dies, according to the definition. They float, they leave their body, and out-of-body experience. That's near-death experiences, or NDEs for short. Shared death experiences are even more fascinating. Excuse me, Dr. Moody also talks about that in this book, Glimpses of Eternity. This is a good book. It's a great book. I read it twice, and it's fascinating. Shared death experiences, or SDEs, offer even more compelling evidence of life after death. Let's go back, rewind just for a second. NDEs, near-death experiences, of course the critics will say, well, that's oxygen deprivation to the brain. And they have a lot of reasons why. Shared death experiences prove that something else is going on. A shared death experience is when the individual actually dies and stays dead, but the family and friends around the individual at the time of death are the ones that experience the near-death experience-like phenomena. They will see the tunnel. They will actually join this person who has just died now, who is going through the tunnel or down the path or whatever their experience is. They'll see that like a panavision of all life experiences. In fact, that's reported by a lot of NDEers, that they revisit all these times of their life, mistakes, good things, whatever. Well, the family and friends around them will see all this take place and be part of it for whatever time it is, for a brief moment or a few moments or whatever. Sounds incredible. Sounds like, oh, come on, who pulled that one out of some dark place? That's not real. It is. There are numerous doctors and nurses, their experiences, and they know something's going on. And they have experienced it. They've been in on it, many of them. And that's what this book, Glimpses of Eternity, is all about. It describes those and exactly what. In fact, Dr. Raymond Moody himself experienced it when his mother died. And he was there with his siblings and family. They all experienced it, and he describes that in this book pretty in a detailed way. Are there any questions, any comments? Anybody here ever had a near-death experience you want to relate or talk about or share or anything like that? Go ahead. You're going to giggle. Oh, let me give you the mic.
I don't know if you call it near-death.
Here, let me give you a mic.
A couple of years ago, I worked at an assisted living as a cook, and there was a special resident there that everyone really loved, and his name was Richard, and I'm going to think he was in his mid-80s, frail, and he was in his bed, and the priest had come to give him last rites, and all of us were invited to come into his room that worked there that cared about him. And I went in the room, and everyone was there for last rites, and the priest left, and there was a hospice Catholic nun sitting there, and I said to her, I would like to speak to Richard, and if I insult you, I'm really sorry, but I would like to talk to him. And she said, go right ahead. And I said, I believe if you want to show me the future, I'll listen. If you want to talk to me after you're gone, I'll listen. And I hope my husband is there to meet you when you get there, because he was a wonderful man and the two of you would be fine to know each other. The next morning I was laying in bed and I was awake and I was petting my dog, and all of a sudden I saw Richard sit up in a bed. The whole room was glorious lit. It was sunlight, sunbeams, fancy silk bedding, and he was about 20 years younger, fuller in the face, didn't look sick, and he sat up and he looked at me and he said, "That was the best nap I ever had." And he goes, "Where am I?" And with that, I saw 3 figures of women floating into the room and said to him, "Welcome home, Richard, welcome home."
Wow. Interesting
And I just
experience.
believe he shared his passing. When I went to work that day, he had died that morning at about that time that I was lying in bed. And that happened to me.
That's interesting. You know, I've heard a lot of those. If you hand the mic just behind you to Jennifer there. No, you don't want to. That's okay. You don't have to. You raise your hand or start.
Well, I just had a story. I don't even have the story, but my uncle was a twin,
Oh, okay.
and it happened to his twin when my uncle died.
Okay. So you know somebody who had one.
Yes.
Okay. You just give it to Michael there. These near-death experiences and these like you were talking about, Karen, with the visitation almost. I've heard of those, and I've had friends who've had those happen. One of my colleagues and one of my dear friends in Australia, her father passed, and she had been going up, traveling 5 or 6 hours to see him on his last days, and she'd just been up there and had come back home, and that's when he passed. But he visited her a couple of times in her house, and she saw him, and she is absolutely not the kind of person. She's more of a scientist type, so she's not exactly somebody you would think would see this sort of thing, and yet here it was. And it really, it was very revealing to her. It was amazing. You know, there's these things that happen all the time, and so the near-death experiences really offer a compelling basis for life after death. But, you know, there's the critics, and they can, well, this is happening with the brain, and that's happening with the brain, and they might be right, who knows. But with shared death experiences, you can't blame it on oxygen deprivation of the brain. The other thing about near-death experiences is that they are all generally the same, regardless of where the stories come from in the world and what the culture is and what the social conditions are. They're all generally the same. They're describing generally the same experience. So how do you explain that if it's, you know, if it's a unique individual's stuff? You can't. So I mean, is it objective proof of it? No. But it sure is compelling. It sure offers compelling proof of life after death. Hence, that combined with other things is why, you know, I have come to believe in it. There are many experiences, and maybe one of these evenings we'll talk about experiences that maybe you've had that you might want to share in terms of spirit realm and on and on. Any questions? Any answer? Oh, quick. No, let me get you the mic. We'll hand it over. Hand over the mic. Here, just let me get it.
You okay. You know all about it. You were there.
My significant other died 2 years ago in December.
You're who? I'm sorry.
My significant other.
Okay.
We were together 20 years.
Sorry.
I was with him when he died. We were alone. And I knew exactly when he passed because within a matter of seconds he sent me a message. And one thing he said, he saw my sister's husband, who just spoke a moment ago, there, and he also saw his dog waiting for him. And then he had a few personal messages. But I'm going to give the mic back to Karen because I want her to say what she saw, which will bring in why Stan saw her husband.
Okay.
I was sitting in Phyllis's house when she called to say that she knew Stan was going to pass that day. And I was sitting there, and there was a hospice nurse. She probably thought I was crazy. But I started to cry, and Phyllis said, "What do you see?" And I said, "I see my husband. And he's walking back and forth by a white bridge surrounded by flowers of day-glow color. And he's walking back and forth, and I cannot see his features, but I see his silhouette, his mannerisms. And he's just pacing back and forth by the bridge. And about an hour later, he was closer to that bridge. And he was not pacing anymore, and he was standing. And then I had to go pick up her granddaughter. And while I was gone, he did pass. But he said to me that to tell Phyllis that everything was going to be all right because he was going to be there to greet him and welcome him home.
Interesting. Very interesting. Thanks. All right. You know, when I hear stories like that are profound or touching, they touch hearts, you know, I don't know everything. I don't know what it's all about. I don't have all the answers. But I know one thing, that there's something about the human condition, something about the human being, something about that hope, something about the heinousness, is that a word? Heinousness of death, of old age and death. And of course, if that was it, then you can't look at a whole world, a whole cosmos that is so ordered, so in place, and so logical, and then you come to this and we live a few years and croak? Really? Come on. It doesn't ring true. It doesn't make sense within the grand scheme of things. Something else is going on, and consciousness is it. And consciousness moves on. It lives on. It must, because there are too many stories, many by credible people. Their credibility is you can't criticize it. And they've had these experiences, so many, if not everybody. Anyway, I appreciate your stories, your experiences, and I appreciate your other comments as well. So perhaps in the future we'll have more on the NDEs and SDEs, but I would recommend these two books, Life After Life and Glimpses of Eternity by Dr. Raymond Moody. You can look at them after the program if you'd like to. Okay, we are doing good. We're going to make a couple of announcements. We're going to stick around a little bit. We'll go outside here tonight afterward and see if we want to do a stargaze, see what the weather's like, see what the sky's like. I haven't been out, so I don't know if it's cloudy or it was kind of clear. So I don't know if it's going to work out tonight, and sometimes I get a little ahead of myself. I get in my enthusiasm. Oh, let's do it. Let's do a sky watch, and we're still getting this off the ground. So there's not as many people, but it's fun to do that. So we'll go out and take a look, spend a few minutes, and of course we have some refreshments here if you'd like to partake of those. But if not, if it doesn't work out tonight, then we'll plan something. As I'd mentioned before, I wanted to get some astronomy club here and set up telescopes, and I think that would be cool. And so we'll do that. And if you have other ideas for things like that we can do as a group, then I'm all ears. We'll look at, as we continue on, we'll look at ideas for paying it forward too. Okay, what else do I want to... Anybody, we've already shared that. All right, I think that's it for my announcements. I'll post the topics for next week. Mine is respect for free will, but I'll post the other topics and send you emails as I do. Okay, the last thing I want to do is the Soul Light guided meditation. This is about a 4 or 5 minute time to just relax. That's about it, and just kind of let things sink in a little bit. So find yourself, whether you're here or out in the broadcast audience, find yourself in a comfortable position. This is just a time to just relax a little bit. You can close your eyes if you wish, but if you leave your eyes open, pick a point straight across from you and just focus on it. Just stare at it. And I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it to the mental count of 3 and just release it out through your mouth and relax. It feels so good to just take a moment and relax and let things go. Keep breathing. Just focus on your breathing. Breathing in relaxation, breathing out stress. As you breathe and as you relax, you'll find that your eyes close gently at whatever time is right for you, and you keep focusing on your breathing. I want you to imagine that beautiful ball of light right above your head. That's your soul light, that's your power, that's your higher self, and it's always there for you. And I want you to see it. See its tentacles reaching out, connecting with everything that there is. It's the epitome of power and encouragement. And we want to bring that down into our bodies. So visualize it coming straight down into the middle of your body and filling you up with light, filling you up with healing energy. Focus that energy on any particular part of your body that hurts or is in pain or that needs it. Let it just soak it up. It feels so good to just let it work. Take another deep breath. In with the good, out with the bad. Just breathe. See that light filling up every part of your body, nurturing, soothing, empowering. And as it fills your body up, you understand and notice that your feet are on the ground and that electricity, that power is coming right through you, right into the ground so that you're grounded, and it's part of the deal. Take just a measure of that power and take a moment and send it to someone in need, someone that you know that maybe needs an encouraging word, maybe they're sick, maybe they're ill. Send them some goodwill. Send them some power. That's the equivalent of praying for them, but this way you're sending them part of you, part of your energy, because your energy is so abundant. It never ends. There's plenty to go around. And send it out to the world too, not only to the locality that you're in, but to the entire planet. In this way, we pray for peace because we send out our energy for peace. Understand as you relax that you are enough, that you are a perfect person inside and out, and you're getting better every day. A perfect work in progress. You have every right to be and have whatever you want to be and have. The same as anyone else, no more, no less. It is yours for the taking. You understand that this is your path, your journey, and you are entitled to it without judgment. You may not have the same journey, and likely don't have the same journey as anyone else's. Everyone's journey is unique. But it's yours, and you can be proud of it, and you can be proud of yourself, and you can just sit erect with your shoulders held high, knowing that you are good. You're right. You're perfect. You're enough. You have everything within you to be anything you want, to do anything you want, to go anywhere you want. Now, as you continue to breathe, feeling the good feelings from your own power, see that light beginning to rise now, moving back upward to just above your head to its normal position, and you know that you can bring it down anytime. You can call on it anytime. You can access it anytime. And as it rises up, floats up, and takes its normal position, you begin to come back, beginning to open your eyes and feeling refreshed, feeling encouraged, feeling empowered. And 1, 2, 3, eyes open wide, you're back. You are enough. You're perfect just the way you are. And you can get better every day. It's entirely up to you. You've got everything you need. Welcome back. Okay, that is the Soul Light 5-minute meditation. Upcoming, I should have mentioned this earlier, in the upcoming weeks we've got some other speakers will be coming to us via Skype on some different topics, and I'll post those as well. So I appreciate your time tonight, and I appreciate the time from our broadcast audience around the world. We really do appreciate you being here with us. And so until next week, listen, think, learn, grow, and live.